So, Saarthak, welcome. We are thrilled to have you on our podcast. We clearly want to learn more about you as an applicant, you as an individual, and really help other applicants who are right now thinking about colleges, right? Whether they are just starting their high school journey or they are seniors ready to start putting together their application to learn from your success and see how they can replicate it. So, Saarthak, welcome. To begin with, would be great if you could share a bit about your background and what inspires you.
Right. Okay. So hi, I'm Saarthak. Thank you for having me. I'm happy to be here and happy to be able to help as much as I can. A little bit about my background. I grew up in Jaipur in India, and I went to this school called J. Shri Periwal International School. We studied the IB curriculum, and I came from a business-oriented family. Grew up with a lot of siblings, with a lot of older people around me, and always had competitive nature, also always had enterprising and creative personality. I always wanted to do extra things. I always wanted to do things my own way, and something I picked up from my family and friends alike. And I started really engaging myself in computer science when I was about 12 years old. And that was kind of when I dipped my toe in the water and started building websites. And from there, I started building apps and tried different things, learned different things. And high school was a great learning experience. I really enjoyed the science elements of it. I really enjoyed the projects I used to do. And computer science was the center of kind of all of it. And that is where I came from. And something else important to my background, which actually is my inspiration, is my parents and my grandparents, just members of my family who have come from different walks of life, have come from different kinds of places, and have been able to provide me with a lot of opportunity and a lot of comfort that I'm very grateful for. And their effort and their hard work to create value for people around them and for their family is something that inspires me to uh, take it to the next level. And they moved from some small village to New Delhi or a big city in India, and I want to take that from New Delhi all the way across the world to the United States.
Awesome. And Saarthak, right now you are at Princeton. You're going to start at Princeton. Tell us where are you in your journey?
Right. So I got accepted to Princeton University in 2021, which is when I started going here. I just finished my junior year and will be a senior in the fall of this year. And I'm studying computer science here and working around entrepreneurship. I founded my own company 2 years ago at Princeton, and which is what I have been primarily working on. And I'm still excited by and engaged by technology and computer science, and want to use it to create impact on the world, create impact on people, create impact on the environment, just some things I care about.
Awesome, awesome. Uh, so, Saarthak, thanks for sharing your background. What would be helpful is going back to your application journey. When did you decide to aim for Ivy League? I mean, clearly Princeton is one of the most sought after schools, but we would love to start where your journey started, right? When did you start looking at an Ivy League and say, you know what, that's where I want to go?
Um, that's a pretty good question. I think it started very early for me, probably earlier than it starts for most people. One big reason was that I was um, really close to three of my siblings, so my real sister and two of my cousins. And all three of them were the same age and 3 years older than me. And I was the youngest one, the only one who was young. But I spent a lot of time with them, was very close to all of them. And I saw them go through the application process way before I was even when I was in middle school. And my brother got into Princeton, and this was his dream school for a while, Princeton or Yale, and he was also a computer science major. He has actually been a mentor to me my entire life and has kind of helped me make the right decisions, helped me learn new things. And he and his role kind of introduced me to Princeton. And I was just always an overly ambitious, overly um, shooting for the stars kind of a kid. And yeah, the Ivy Leagues were obviously something that a lot of people in our high school used to target. I also went to a very specific high school in Jaipur, which almost specializes in sending kids to the United States. So the entire culture of my school and my friends and the way we prepared our extracurriculars, or the way we worked around our academics, or what kinds of things we did in our free time, it was all done with the mindset and the mentality of trying to go to the best colleges in the world, which are in the United States. And yeah, I think the combination of my family, elder siblings, and most importantly, the high school I went to, J. Shri Periyal International School, were the reasons why I initially got interested at a very, very young age. Like Princeton was my dream school since I was 13 years old, I think.
Wow. Must have been great to get into that dream school. And we want to learn more about that. So, to begin with, maybe you could share how many colleges did you apply to, Saarthak? And what was your yield? How many accepted you?
So I think my yield was 40%. I only applied to five colleges and I got into two of them. So 40%, pretty simple. Um, the reason I only applied to five is because I got accepted to Yale in the early round. So after I got accepted into Yale, I knew that I wouldn't go to 85% of the schools I was going to apply to. I had a list of about 25 schools that I would have applied to had I not gotten into Yale. I had also applied to UC Berkeley, UCLA, um, Georgia Tech, USC, and UIUC, five schools that I withdrew from when I got into Yale because um, I would not have gone there over Yale. And I kind of wanted to, this is something that's part of our school's culture, but I wanted to give other students from my school better opportunity to get accepted, because as internationals, it's already really challenging for people from one school to get into a university. So if UCLA is going to accept five students from our school, I would much rather have someone else take my spot when I'm not going to go there anyways. Um, so those are the schools I withdrew from, and the five schools I eventually did apply to were Princeton, Yale, Harvard, MIT, and Stanford. So um, yeah, I believe that Princeton and Stanford were schools that I wanted to go to over Yale, and Harvard and MIT were not necessarily schools I really wanted to go to. They were schools my parents really wanted me to go to. And yeah, those schools I applied to because just to see if I could get in.
Awesome. So, though that's clearly a elite list. Uh, would love to understand what was your selection criteria, Sarthak. I mean, you speak of schools that are clearly what one would define reach schools in most cases, right? And
Right.
you're applying to pretty much all reach schools.
Hmm.
So help us understand. And even within reach, there clearly a criteria that you applied. You're going after computer science, right?
Hmm.
So would be helpful for us to understand how did you pick those schools? What was the decision criteria?
Right. So this little term that my dad liked to use for some of the schools that I applied to was that, oh, these are not reach schools, these are out of reach schools, because he thought that these are schools that are too hard to get into. But it was just an added challenge. Like I was very aware of how challenging these schools are to get into. And um, I would say that the schools I listed are probably reach schools for any student in the world. I don't think anyone can confidently say that, oh, this is just a match or a safety school for me. Um, and I think my selection criteria was actually pretty complex. I wrote an algorithm for it. It was not complicated. It was just a simple weighting system where I made a spreadsheet of categories I cared about, and then I weighted each category based on how much that category mattered to me, and then I scored each university based on each category, and then there was a final score, and then I ranked them by that. And Princeton and Stanford were flying ahead of all of the others. And one of the categories was just personal preference or culture and vibes, like what school makes me feel like I want to be there, which is pretty heavily weighted for me because I care about that. So if I was to talk more about the others, academic prowess is probably the first one. I wanted to go to a very academically rigorous school. I wanted to challenge my mental faculties. I wanted to grow as a learner. I wanted to put myself in a more uncomfortable situation than I was in high school. And that has been the case at Princeton. It's a very challenging place to be in. Um, and so that was one of the most important criteria, and more specifically in that the fields that I was interested in. So the school had to be good at STEM education, specifically computer science. Good computer science schools were um, the if I was to pick only one criteria, that would be the criteria because that was the thing that mattered the most. If you think about the other schools I applied to that I withdrew from were also UIUC, Georgia Tech, UC Berkeley. They're all computer science schools, and yeah, so that was also a big factor for me. And then I think beyond that, your list can be as long or as short as you want. It's this is about what you as a student, as a person cares about. Like if I really love politics and theater and I love um, traveling and the opportunity to live in different places and study in different cultures, then I would want a school with amazing exchange programs and great foreign campuses and a lot of opportunities that send you to different places and a great theater program. So it kind of depends on what you really care about. And I personally think that no category is irrelevant or stupid because it's your experience at the end of the day. It's 4 years of your life, and it can be very instrumental to who you become as a person. So yeah, your experience matters, and you should take into account everything that you can. um, the two schools I got into were Princeton and Yale, and it was a very uh, challenging decision for me because Princeton was my dream school, but I got into Yale first, and I spent about 6 months of my life believing that I'm on my way to Yale because I did not know I was going to get into another school at the time. And it was a very extensive comparison process, a lot of conversations with other people. This is something every student should do, talk to other students in their school who already are at these universities, or just find people through Instagram or LinkedIn. There are a lot of students from India who would always love to help out another student who just wants to do better and wants to learn about how they can do better and gain more perspective into what place they would like to be at. And I spoke to a lot of students from my high school. Like I said, I was fortunate that I went to one where um, going to Princeton was something everyone wanted to do every year. So there were a lot of people with a lot of insights into the process, into the nuances of the universities, people who've made the exact same choice before between Princeton and Yale, and how did they decide? For me, the dilemma was I thought Princeton was better in terms of the academics and the computer science, and um, it was safer as a town than New Haven. Princeton is a very quiet, very beautiful place to be in. And um, my brother was at Princeton, was another huge factor for me. I spent 1 year with him here, which helped me adjust a lot. Yale, on the other hand, I felt was the happier place to be in. It felt like better culture, better residential college bonding, better. I thought that I would have more opportunity to be creative and entrepreneurial at Yale. Um, I've had plenty of opportunity at Princeton too, but those were criteria I was considering at the time.
Got it. Got it. Thank you. I appreciate the clarity. So, Saarthak, I mean, clearly these schools, you explained the criteria you used. Now, of course, these schools also have hard criteria: SAT, GPA, class
Mhm.
rank. Would be helpful for us to understand what what of these hard criteria did you bring to a table? What was your SAT score? What was your GPA? What was your class rank? Because it's important for folks to understand there's an aspect of getting into schools which are absolutely to do with the hard facts. And then there's the essay aspect of it.
SAT score was a 1590, super scored. Um, I believe without a super score it was probably a 1550 max, but it doesn't really matter. You submit your super score. Um, I had an 800 on the physics SAT subject test, but I believe they've discontinued that. So it is probably irrelevant to college students now or college applicants now. My We didn't really have a GPA system in my high school. Um, we did the IGCSEs when I was in the ninth and 10th grades, and I had a 97.4% when we took our final board examinations. And the 97.4 was, I believe, the average of my top five subjects. And the way IGCSE is structured is you pick your own number of subjects, and it can range from a minimum of six to a maximum of 10, or a minimum of seven to a maximum of 10 in my high school. I believe GCSE as a whole probably offers a more flexible range, but my high school had 7 to 10. And each subject, you get a grade, and the grade is A star is the highest, then there's an A, then I believe there's B star, and then B minus, something like that. But A star is the highest grade, and I think this the IGCSEs was the first time where I really tried to overstep and try to push academic potential, because I opted for 11 subjects instead of 10, even though 11 subjects don't fit in a timetable in our school because you can't take 11. I also took 11 subjects in 10th grade after having studied only 10 in ninth grade. And biology was my 11th subject just because I was interested, and I just randomly sat in one class and thought it was cool. So I adamantly picked it, even though my father and my director and my teachers, the biology professor, was like, don't do it. But I did anyways. And I just wanted to prove to everyone that even if I don't end up as the valedictorian for our IGCSEs, I want to be able to do something that no one has ever done before. So my class rank back then was three. There were two people who scored higher than me, and they both had 10 subjects and got A stars on all 10 of them. I was the first student in my high school ever to attempt 11 subjects because it was not possible, and I got A stars on all 11 of them, which uh, which I think stood as one of those academic achievements that made me stand out as a candidate. And I don't believe it was about, oh, my GPA was really high, or yes, I got above a 90% on 11 different subjects over 2 years. But I think that what truly makes it meaningful is the concept of pushing oneself beyond what system and what opportunities you're presented with, which is something I tell to every single person who asks me for advice on college, is that the way colleges judge applicants is completely circumstantial. Like, it is based on where you come from and what kind of opportunities you were provided with. A student who goes to a $60,000 a year private school in the Bay Area would have a very different standard than someone who goes to a random public high school in a small town in India because of the infrastructure, the opportunities, the environment, the availability of technology, the information around them, and just the preparation that they had, the exposure that they had, and what that person was able to achieve within their peers is what truly makes someone spike or makes someone stand out in any college application. And I think that if you don't do that in any aspect whatsoever, that's how you kind of fall into just the pile of every other college applicant. But anyways, continuing with the numbers, I did the IB curriculum in my last 2 years of high school, 11th and 12th grade, and I ended up with a perfect 45 on 45. So my class rank was one. And yes, especially as an international student, having good grades and having exceptional and consistent academic performance is arguably one of the most important things to get into elite universities. The reason being that those universities pride themselves on academic rigor. They are what they are because they are the most uh, sophisticated academic institutions in the world. And they want students who will be able to follow, will be able to deal with, and will be able to leverage and excel through the system that the university is going to put them in. And that's effectively the only role of your numbers and your grades, to show them that uh, you can handle the high pressure, you can handle the hard work. I don't think that the numbers truly mean anything beyond just your ability to make the effort and the I guess your IQ and mental ability, which sort of like not everything can be worked on. There's some sort of ability involved in it. Um, but I am not one of the people who believes that you need to have statistics to get into one of these schools, because I have met personally people here who don't and who are really, really great at something else, something completely different. But again, like I said, the point is to prove that when you care about something and when you're engaged in something, then everyone else who was given the exact same inputs as you, everyone else around you, you are way, 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 way better than them because of your talent, because of your work ethic, and because of your consistency. And that's what everyone kind of needs to prove through academics or otherwise.
I know you mentioned you're not a big believer of hard statistics. So I think I already know the answer to this question, but do you believe, right? We have had this COVID situation where SAT was required, then SAT is not required. Now we are back to where some schools are going on the SAT bandwagon again. What's your perspective on SAT scores impact on acceptance to these good schools?
I believe, again, from the perspective of an international student, I believe it is still very important, at least from personal experience, because every single student from my high school in my year or in any year that I saw, either a couple years after me or a few years before me, did not get into any of these elite schools without a great SAT score. And when I say great, I would say probably a 1500. Anything above 1500, you're you're just competing with your peers and you're trying to be the best because that's your nature. But between a 1550 and a 1590, there's absolutely no difference in my opinion. And I don't think anyone really cares. Like, you are not going to get accepted if you have a 1580, and it and you would have gotten if you would have gotten rejected on the 1570, or 1580 is not going to get you accepted
I
to
see.
any applicant in the world. That's not going to happen. Um, do I think the SAT should be important? No, I don't think it should be important at all. I think it's a very specific learned skill. Being good at the SAT means that you are good at the SAT. It doesn't really mean anything else. It means that you have basic reading skills, you understand basic English grammar structure, and you understand basic math, which most high school students prove through other means anyways. So yeah, it's a standardizer, but it also, in my opinion, should not be important. But I think that given the reality of college admissions and how competitive they are, as an applicant, the best thing you can do is stack it up with as much as you can, because having a 1580 is better than not committing an SAT score easily. For no matter what kind of an applicant you are, it's going to help you. If you are an athlete who just needs an okay SAT score, a 1580 would get you in with flying colors into that university. Or if you're just a student, for academics. So yeah, I believe that the SAT still is pretty important, especially for international students, because you need to throw every weapon you possibly can at them. Um, but fighting for 20 or 30 points is a waste of effort and time, which can be invested into things way more meaningful, which are your extracurriculars and your the investment of your time, which in my opinion is the most important thing in a college application, more important than statistics and essays.
That's a great answer. Talking about extracurricular, I mean, clearly we talked about the hard stats, um, and we talked about your college selection criteria. I think one of the other aspects that's very important is the extracurricular activities and achievements. Right? You started coding in eighth grade, right? Um, can you tell us more about what got you into it, and what was an achievement that you're really proud of while you were pursuing the love of coding that you leverage for your applications?
Right. So coding sort of created my entire application, essentially. There were a lot of other things to it, but I think everything was centered around that theme. Like I mentioned earlier, I have an older brother who also went to Princeton, graduated end of my freshman year. He was who got me into coding because he was doing computer science 3 years older than me, and I was 12 years old at the time. And he was the president of the computer science club in my high school, and it was really new. Nobody back at that age, computer science was completely foreign to me and most people around me. Nobody really knew anything about development, about programming. It was just getting introduced to a place like Jaipur. And someone fortunately opened this club called the Turing F in my high school, which I tried out for. I did their initial competition to select members, and you had to build a website on a random topic that you get on the spot. And I learned how to build a website after I signed up for the tryout over, I think, 1 or 2 weeks. And I did amazingly for being 12 years old at the time and got in. And it's not like I was super engaged or that club got me really far, but that was kind of my first feet in the door. And then a lot of my friends, my brother, and a lot of people around me in my high school, there was a big computer science culture. So I was very engaged with it. And I just kept learning through the internet. I really enjoy self-learning. It's just something learning things through the internet, learning things through YouTube, through Udemy, through Coursera, or Khan Academy, or random places has just been something that I really like to do my entire life, which is how I learned computer science for the most part. And I something that I ended up doing with it that I'm really proud of is this. There's quite a few things, to be honest, but one of them is this competition called Google Code In, which is this open source development competition hosted by Google every year. It's online; anyone in the world can participate. I think no, I think it's for ages 13 to 17, so it's for young students. And what the way the competition is structured is that there are technology companies that participate, and they're all open source. And what open source means is that the entire code base is available for the world to see. It's public use, and anyone can suggest edits to it, and they can so it's like the entire world can work on that code base if they wanted to. And they put up different tasks on the website of the competition about fixing things on their website or designing new features or writing the script to get this. Like, it depends on the company and their own processes and their priorities, but that's how you were given tasks, and you would kind of pick a company based on your strengths. And at the time, my strengths were web development, pretty much, and design. So I picked a company based on that, and for 2 years in a row, I was a global finalist and ranked third in the world amongst 10,000 students, I think. And I think the only reason I did not have the skill set, or I was not a computer science prodigy by any means. I did not know a crazy amount of computer programming. The only reason I was able to do it was just my sheer effort and 50 hours, 60 hours a week of just not sleeping, because the maintainers of my company were in Germany, and I would be working all day in school. I would be working in class, and then I would be working at home after I came back all the time. And because my maintainers, the people who actually were the professional people working on the websites, lived in Germany, I had to be up all night to be in communication with them for a lot of the work I did. So just an obscene amount of effort I put into that, and that was probably the first thing on my honor section in um, on my common application. And yeah, definitely something I'm really proud of.
That is amazing. Uh, how did you weave running, playing table tennis into your applications, Saarthak? What was your personality trait that you're aiming to highlight by talking about running and playing table tennis?
I believe the personality trait is determination, uh, especially through running. I wrote my Princeton activity essay and my Stanford activity, my all my extracurricular essays on running, and my common application was actually completely centered around table tennis. Table tennis was in my application was part of my extracurriculars. I spoke about that I played at a national level. I was successful for many years and all of that. But beyond that, it was more for storytelling. I used table tennis effectively for storytelling in my common application. It was not particularly highlighted in other places. Running, on the other hand, I this is actually very true for me and my journey as a person and my journey with running. But I used running as a medium for something that taught me how to endure pain and taught me consistency when you're struggling and taught me how to just keep going and highlight how obsessive I was. This is something my dad has always said to me since I was very young, that your willpower is crazy. Like ever since you were a very young kid, if you said that you're not going to do something, you were very weird about not doing it or doing it, whatever it is that you said. And there was this competition I did um, in 11th grade called 100 Days of Running, where you have to run a minimum of 2 kilometers a day for 100 days straight. And I ended up running 616 kilometers in 100 days. So that's 6.2 kilometers a day on average. I ran a half marathon on on my 100th day. And the way I told that story was just about how in public places or at 11 p.m. at night in parking lots or early in the morning in Central Park, I was running. And just every day, I couldn't make excuses. I was sick. Sometimes I had a headache. Sometimes I was too busy, but I just had to get out and run every single day. Um, which I believe that storytelling is probably one of the most important things that you do in your application. And that's something you should try to do with your extracurriculars. You should try to tell a story. You should try to connect emotionally through it. You should talk about what that means to you as a person beyond just what the activity is. So running is not something that I just do for fitness or just for getting out of the house or because I want to race and beat people. I do it because it makes me mentally stronger. I do it because it helps me push myself. I do it because it helps me realize what I'm capable of and the things that I can endure to achieve what I set my mind to. And talking about your activities in that way is something everyone should try to do.
That's fantastic, Sarthak. You mentioned a number of things, right, Sarthak? You talked about grades, you talked about coding, you talked about SAT. So you had really good outcomes on every one of these activities that you pursued. This is one of the things that when we talk to a lot of high schoolers, one of the things that they struggle with is just their ability to balance the number of activities they want to do. They want to do schoolwork. They want to do good in schoolwork. They want to do a number of extracurricular activities, right? They want to do an, whatever else they feel is important that's going to help them get into the school that they want to get into. What would be your advice to balance all of these things? Because mental health is important, particularly while you're going through this application journey. And you were very successful in doing it. So, would love to learn from how you managed it.
The first and most important piece of advice would be stop trying to do everything because it doesn't help. I know it kind of sounds like when I talk about my application that, oh, I was just doing everything and I was good at everything, but that's not true. There's 50% of the things that I kind of tried or thought about trying and didn't actually try or did and was not very good at. And things that I just wasn't interested in doing, even regardless of whether generally people believe it's helpful for your application or not. One example is Model UN. Everyone I met knew was associated to in my high school did Model UN, and I have not been to a single Model UN conference in my entire life. It was believed unanimously that you have to do Model UNs and you have to win best delegates to get into college, and it's the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard because it's not even remotely true. I think that Model UN does not help 80% of the people who do it because 80% of the people want to do things that have nothing to do with model UN. If you want to be a doctor and you're applying as a molecular biology major, or you want to be a computer scientist and you're doing electrical engineering or something, model UN is not going to help you whatsoever. It can be your 10th activity to show that you are more interesting as a person. It can be something you did in your free time. But trying to give 70% effort to, or 45% effort to like 10 different activities is probably the biggest mistake high schoolers make in attempt to create a good, well-rounded application, because it genuinely does not provide any value, and it's very logical if you think about it. As a college, as a university, as an admissions officer, if you're considering applicants to your university, you do not want people who are kind of good at a lot of things. That's not what they're looking for. If I'm a student who went to 4 state MUNs and one honorable mention in a couple of them and one best delegate in one of them, and I'm also a squash player who won 2 district championships and was the best player in my school, and I'm also really good at math, and I also wrote a children's storybook, and I also have a YouTube channel, and I am the fastest runner in my neighborhood. Okay, great job. You come to our university and you are not the best at anything. There is someone who is way, way better than you at everything that you do. There are people who are MUNers and compete globally and are extremely better than you, or at least you haven't proven that you're better than them. There are squash players who are playing nationally, internationally, representing their country at a very young age, who are way better than you. There are students doing international math Olympiads, people who are doing competition, doing research in mathematics at stunningly young ages, who are way ahead of you when it comes to mathematics. And the fact that you won the inter-house mathematics competition in your high school does not mean anything to them. And that's the perspective that people, once they have, it kind of changes everything. That why am I trying to be good at everything? Because they're not going to care. A college does not care that you are kind of good at a sport unless you're going to help the university with that sport. If you're the best in the country and you can play for that college's team, it's going to go a long way in your application. Otherwise, you cannot be spending a significant amount of your time trying to do that, because you're only diluting your efforts and then none of your activities are impressive enough. So the way to find balance, most importantly, is pick a few things that you like. For me, when I was younger, it was table tennis. I did not do a lot of table tennis in my last few years of high school. I also was not able to do Google Code in my final 2 years of high school because I did not have time. I The few things I picked were computer science. I built a lot of things around computer science. I used to run for fun. It was not something I ever did for college. Um, Played table tennis when I was younger, and that's kind of it. Apart from that, I just did my schoolwork. There was not a million different things that I did, or a million different things that I tried to be very, very good at. There were a few things that I tried to be very, very good at, because that's all you need to do.
It's a great perspective, Saurabh. Thanks for sharing that. And I think also keeping it in perspective. Um, so, so let's talk about application essays, the favorite topic. A lot of students spend a lot of time on. So, how did you approach writing your application essays? You have a number of things, right? You talked about table tennis, you talked about coding, you talked about um, schoolwork. There are lots of different things that you could have picked, and within each one of them, there are lots of different aspects you could basically talk about, right? How did you pick what you want to write about and what aspect of that activity you want to highlight? Would love to understand your approach to application essays.
I believe that it's just about honesty. I think that honesty is the one and most important fundamental principle you should keep in mind when you're writing any essay for a college. Because yes, you could potentially be a little dishonest. Everyone exaggerates on their application or tries to sell themselves, because that's the point of what you're trying to do. But a dishonest application is very disengaging to the actual reader, and the amount of applications and the amount of essays that admissions officers read are so high. They read thousands and thousands and thousands of essays every single year, and they do it for decades. So they have read every single story, they have read every single kind of achievement, they have read every single kind of metaphor and analogy that you could have come up with, they have read every single Harry Potter reference under the sun, right? And trying to create an essay that's going to impress them is just going to be really obvious to them that it's dishonest because of the sheer amount of essays that they go through. Like it's very obvious the truth behind an essay, no matter how you try to spin the story. So I think, and I genuinely believe this, and I tell this to everyone, like I said, who asks me for college advice. The purpose of your essays is not to impress the admissions officer. You already did that. That's what you have been doing the entire point up to this. uh, When they start reading your Common App PDF, they learned about you, they learned basic things about you. The first thing that shows up is your honors, I believe. That's what you start with. You start with impressing them. This is what I won. This medal. This is what I'm the best at. This is what I'm the best in the world at. I topped my school every single year for 12 straight years. Then you talk about your stats. Even before they read your application, they probably go through your transcript and your letters of recommendation that are glowing and talking about how incredible you are. And then you talk about your activities where you brag on for so long about how impressive the things that you've done are. And now, if you are going to write 600 words trying to tell them how cool the things you've done are, it's not going to add any other dimension to your application. I think that a good essay is an essay that makes them want to let you in. It's not about, oh, this person is so smart, they should be here. It's about, this is the person who will do the most out of the opportunities we give to them. This is the person who actually cares about being here. Right? I what I tried to do with my essays was make them fall in love with me, make them care about me so much by how real my motivations are and how real I am as a person, that they get personally invested in trying to get me in. Because that's how college admissions work. They all read your essays, and then the people who read and like certain applications talk about it with other admissions officers, and then the committee decides. So someone is going to advocate and fight for you to get you in to that university. So you need to find that champion by connecting to the person. So if you try to impress and not express through your essays as as a baseline rule, it's not going to be a good essay. So I barely spoke about any of my achievements in my common application essay was about my skin condition vitiligo and how I struggled with it as a kid and I was very insecure because of it and hated everything about it for the longest time. And many years later, began to realize how important it actually is to me and how even being insecure and trying to hide these white spots on my skin for so long kind of led to making me the person that I was and gave me the strength and the experiences that I needed to do the kinds of things that I want to do. And of course, there was a lot of storytelling involved. There was an entire table tennis competition and drama, and that's just writing skill and constant iteration. I probably had 21 drafts of my Common App essay. It's a lot of work that goes into it, but the story that it told was there was not a single lie on the entire piece of paper because me talking about how my struggle and my insecurities taught me things and how I came out of it a stronger person, wanting to take on more obstacles, wanting to push myself. That is so much more meaningful than spending 600 words talking about how good you were at something. And at least that's my perspective on it, that the honesty and how genuine your essay is, if you're able to connect with the person reading your essay, that's going to get you way, way further than trying to impress them with your essays because they've been as impressed as they would have been already. Nothing you can add at that point.
That's such a great answer, Sarthak. Express, not impress. I like that. So let's talk about reflection and advice. Right? You said your yield was 40%. Right? You got admitted into, you didn't get into three. So how did you handle rejection? How did you keep perspective, Sarthak?
Um, Again, I got a little fortunate because I got into Yale early on, and I did not get into Stanford. Stanford was also my dream school. I probably would have wanted to go to Stanford more than I wanted to go to Princeton because of the entrepreneurship and computer science culture that they have, and just being in Silicon Valley as a computer science major. I also love the Golden State Warriors. So again, like I said, my list was really long. So I considered a lot of things when I was making my decisions. Um, but yeah, I did not get into Stanford. And yes, I was disappointed. But I think if I had to talk about perspective when it comes to rejection, I think it's one about understanding that going to a great university does not automatically set you up for an incredibly successful life. And not going to, more importantly, not going to one of these elite universities in no way restricts you from having a very successful life. There is so much opportunity and there's so much room to grow at the end of you're exiting high school right now. Your real life is far from beginning right now. Like there's so much room to work on yourself and to improve yourself that I think regardless of what college you end up at, that is what where you were meant to be. I think that's the kind of perspective that having it will help you realize that, for example, I did not get into Stanford and I got into Princeton. And Princeton is a way less entrepreneurship focused school than Stanford is. And I thought that that would be a disadvantage for me because it has less of a culture of entrepreneurship. But one, that was less true than I thought, and it was actually pretty okay. And two, because there are so few entrepreneurs here, the ones that do exist, like myself, the entire university kind of flocks to your support, and you will have all the resources, all the advisors, all the mentorship, all the legal advice, everything that you're looking for, because there isn't an oversaturation of startups coming from Princeton at all times. There was a silver lining that I didn't even think about when I was not wanting to go to Princeton because it doesn't have a lot of entrepreneurship, right? And an example for someone else could be that you did not get into one of your top five dream schools or your REIT schools. You went to one of your math schools, and you were placed in an environment where you felt like you could have been in a more challenging, more competitive place. But going to a school that, in your opinion, was less hard or less challenging than the one you thought you could have ended up at can give you so much opportunity to be the best you can be at that place that the eventual result might be better than it would have been at the best school in the world. Yeah, I mean, it's obviously going to be hard because if you worked, I know how hard high school kids work. I know how hard I worked and how hard my friends work and how hurtful it was for people who did not get into their dream schools. And that's the beauty of it. I don't think there should be any regret because if you tried your best, then wherever you're going is the perfect place for you because yeah, doing everything you can is kind of the only thing that matters. So yeah.
That's great. I mean, speaking of that, from your perspective, what role do you think luck plays in the admission process here?
A huge one. You have to be lucky. Again, like I said, I have mentioned my luck so many times in this conversation about how I'm so fortunate because of my family, because of my brother, because of my high school, my friends, my grandparents, just the people around me. Now I'm so fortunate that I go to Princeton University and the opportunities this place provides me. I My life has been full of luck. I am lucky that I got in here. It was a 2.7% acceptance rate. So no matter how hard I worked, I got super lucky that I was one of the 2.7% of people selected. Um, because I'm sure that the other 97.3% people were incredibly brilliant too, because they're all Princeton applicants. Nobody is stupid. Um, so yeah, I know plenty of people who got not plenty. I know a few people who got rejected from every single Ivy League, and they were brilliant and were really sad about it and thought that they failed at their high school journey. And then 2 days later, they got into Stanford and realized that, oh my God, my life is going to be. So again, you can get lucky, you can get into one school, you can get super unlucky and get into none of the schools. You can get very lucky and get into a bunch of schools. I got super lucky and got into two. So it has to be a combination of everything, but control what you can, work as hard as you can, and try to tip the scales in your favor. And hopefully, luck is on your side too.
Thank you. We created Good Goblin to help college applicants. We'd love to get your perspective on Good Goblin and its mission.
I mean, it's obviously a great initiative. I believe that there's so much confusion and uncertainty in high schoolers around college admissions. It's such a daunting thing because there just isn't a lot of clarity. Like the things that I'm saying are all my opinion. That's what I believe it is because that's how I did it and it worked for me. And I think I'm 100% right. When I give advice on how to talk about your extracurriculars or how to write your essays or how to decide how to spend your time, I believe in my heart I'm 100% right because that's my experience. But something what Good Goblin is doing that it's accumulating the experiences of a lot of people and it's collecting all these data points to try to figure out uh, what works for people and what doesn't work for people. Because again, it's such a nuanced process and it's so holistic that every applicant is truly unique. Of course, I think there's a very certain cream of college applicants that are so brilliant that they are just turboed into the university. The large chunk of them that get in are obviously brilliant, really, really brilliant as well. But they have something unique about their personality or something that they worked obsessively towards becoming, or some trait about them that kind of sets them apart from the other 98%, which, yeah, but it's constantly going to be a challenge, and any resource that students can get is wonderful, and it's really great that you're doing this.
That's awesome, Sarthak. I just want to thank you for taking the time and sharing your journey with us, highlighting what you feel is important and really allowing us to keep things in perspective. Thank you for taking the time, Sarthak.
Thank you.